Hi, my name is Adelina, I'm 28 years old, and it's been 4 years since I've lived in my parents' apartment again, the one where I spent my entire childhood, where the walls still seem to hold the smells of my mother's kitchen, traces of my teenage rebellion, and countless late-night conversations about the meaning of life that my friends and I had, sitting on the windowsill, wrapped in a blanket, as if it could protect us from the whole adult world. Don't get me wrong, please, I'm not one of those people who gave up or couldn't build their lives, a loser who has to live with her parents because she can't afford even a modest home. No, I'm not like that at all. I pay rent, take care of absolutely all bills, from utilities to internet and repairs, and, moreover, I completely transformed this space, making it modern, stylish, and incredibly cozy. So much so that interior blogs would gladly accept photos of my apartment if I only wanted to send them. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. My parents, however, reacted to this whole transformation without much enthusiasm, as if they could not fully believe that an old, faded and long, tired apartment could turn into something else, into a space where every corner breathes taste, light and comfort. Mom, who is extremely stingy with praise and more often expresses dissatisfaction than approval, once nevertheless admitted that the result was not bad, and, believe me, it meant a lot. The kitchen, once a dreary area with peeling cabinets the color of old bone and terrible tiles that we inherited from the 80s, now shone with light like decorations for a cooking show, matte facades, soft lighting, granite countertops the color of wet sand, built in stainless steel appliances, and even a coffee machine that brewed every time I got my morning espresso, like I knew it was the only thing keeping me afloat in this world. I replaced the floors, choosing warm oak with a velvety texture, refreshed the walls in neutral but saturated shades, added mirrors and greenery, and even completely redesigned the bathroom. Now there was a large shower cabin with transparent partitions, marble tiles, and brass faucets. As if from a hotel in Madrid, the whole place became a reflection of my taste, my inner world, my desire for beauty. And I was proud that I was able to embody it. Meanwhile, my younger sister was still living with her parents, in the next room, among her eternal chaos, pizza boxes, and piles of clothes on an armchair that had long since ceased to be an armchair, because under all this mass of things it had turned into an abstract mountain. She had some kind of temporary, barely noticeable job, either as a receptionist or a phone operator, I had long since stopped following, a job that brought her no joy, no money, or even hope for change, and every time we gathered for a family dinner, usually once a month, and sometimes less often because everyone was busy or pretended to be busy, the conversation always turned in the same direction. Like an old train with no arrows left, I'm really looking for the best opportunities, she said, enthusiastically, picking up a piece of something her mother had prepared with a fork and checking her phone at the same time. There's a company recruiting executives, and I feel like I have a real chance, she said, and her parents nodded in response, as if she'd just announced that she was going to open a foundation to save the world. That sounds wonderful, honey. How can we help you? Do you want me to help you write a resume? Her father spoke as if he believed again, hoped again, lived her hopes again, despite the fact that such conversations had already been heard perhaps 20 times in the last 2 years. The names of the companies changed, the manner of presentation varied slightly, but the essence remained the same. She spoke, we listened, my parents approved, I was silent, because I knew she wasn't going to change anything. She accepted her comfort zone, she liked being the center of attention, she liked feeling that something great was about to happen even if it would never happen. What about me? I'm making connections too, and she continued to make connections, in the sphere, in the industry, online, anywhere. That's very clever, his father agreed. Right now, connections decide everything, and I sat at the table, smiling politely and trying not to roll my eyes, because there was no point in it. All the participants in this performance knew perfectly well that it had no continuation, but continued to play their roles, as if they were afraid to break the fragile structure of self-deception and parental love. This routine dragged on for months, the same conversations, the same complaints about superiors, the same dreams, the same empty promises to start all over again. I'm used to, honestly, for me, it all turned into background noise, like a radio that someone forgot to turn off. But one Sunday dinner turned out to be completely different. He was the beginning of something that I couldn't understand at the time. I have amazing news. My sister blurted out even before my mother served dessert, her voice trembling with excitement and her eyes shining as if she had just won a trip to the Maldives. Her parents, as if on cue, turned their heads in her direction, expecting another career turn that was unlikely to happen, and I got ready to listen to another illusion. I've met someone, she said, slowly, with emphasis on each word, as if this was going to be the moment that would change everything. His name is Gaspard, and he's amazing. He's handsome, smart, and has a great job in finance. She paused, inhaling the reaction as if it were her scene, and he proposed to me. The fork fell out of my hand, hitting the porcelain with a loud clink. What? I whispered. The sister, beaming, raised her left hand, and a ring sparkled on it, a large, bold, diamond ring, which was not on her last time. Look, isn't it gorgeous? She asked, not so much at us as at herself. The parents gasped and trembled, like in a romantic movie in which the daughter marries a prince, and I sat there, still not believing what was happening. Wait a minute, when did you meet him? I asked, hardly believing what I had heard. 2 months ago, she said, as if that was perfectly reasonable. 2 months. I stared at her. I know a lot about him. We met on a dating site, we spent a lot of time together, and he's perfect for me. With that peremptory confidence in her voice, my sister looked at each of us as if she had just presented an ingenious proof of the great theorem, and now she just had to wait for the well-deserved applause. I turned my gaze to my parents, hoping that at least they would express the same amount of skepticism that I had felt from the very beginning, that perhaps they would want their youngest daughter to slow down a little to make sure that this ideal man was really who he claimed to be, so that they would show common sense. They advised her not to rush into decisions that could change her whole life, but instead, my father, without a moment's hesitation, said with some kind of childish naivety, "We are so glad to meet him," and my mother, as if continuing this melody in a different key, added, "Yes. When can we meet your fiancé?" And her voice sounded genuine joy, as if she really couldn't wait to hug someone who, in her opinion, would become a new member of the family. The sister smiled radiantly, filled with pride, as if her plan was going perfectly according to a pre-planned scenario. I was hoping that you would ask. Gaspard would be happy to meet the family. I sat there, feeling the reality I was living in begin to slowly and worryingly unravel, like a fabric stretched too tight. Can't they all really see how much this story resembles a fairy tale without a prologue, a leap without insurance, passion disguised as a mature decision? Don't you think you should wait a little longer? I nevertheless decided to interrupt this enthusiastic flow, trying to speak calmly, but with the firmness that should have convinced them to stop for at least a minute and think, get to know him better before making such an important decision. God, Adelina, you're so boring, my sister interrupted me sharply, like a knife through glass. And there was not only irritation in her voice, but also some kind of malevolent superiority. Just because you don't have a boyfriend doesn't mean you should be jealous of me. Her words hit unexpectedly hard, not because they were true, but because she was aiming not at an argument, but at me personally, and this was one of those attacks that come not from the head, but from the inside. But I wasn't going to let her dodge. It's not jealousy, I replied, trying to speak calmly. It's common sense. It's not just about dating or romance. This is your life. It's a marriage. Well, I'm happy. And that's the main thing, she said with such conviction, as if that was the argument that ended the argument. The parents nodded in agreement, like jurors who have long been clear about everything. I looked at them, feeling like an outsider in my own family, as if everyone around me had decided to play a play whose script had not been shown to me. Obviously, I was the only one who thought the whole situation was completely insane. It's been 3 weeks since that dinner, and to be honest, I've been trying my best to forget about the engagement, not because I didn't care, but because I knew my opinion wouldn't change anything here. I had enough things to do, tasks, and thoughts of my own, and thinking about how ill-considered my sister's choice was didn't bring me any closer to solving the problem or to peace of mind. But on Thursday evening, my phone rang. The sister, without any greeting, without preliminaries, said firmly, almost in a commanding tone, "No, I need you to come to dinner this Saturday. Gaspard will come to meet everyone. Mom and Dad are cooking. You should be." I had plans, small but pleasant, to go shopping a little, maybe watch a TV series, maybe make myself tomato soup and just take the day off. But what can you do? family obligations cannot be cancelled, especially when it comes to getting engaged to a stranger. On Saturday, exactly at the appointed time, I arrived at my parents' house. The apartment was filled with the aromas of baked meat, spices, and caramelized onions, the smells that always created a sense of comfort and celebration. I knocked and went in. Everyone was already gathered in the living room. My father, according to tradition, took his place in the right corner of the sofa. My mother sat next to him, holding a plate of sliced cheese in her hands. My sister was sitting in an armchair by the window, and he was sitting next to her, a man I had never seen before, but I immediately realized that this was Gaspard. I'll give her due, he was really handsome, tall, with a confident set of shoulders, a perfect jawline, with a polished style and that easy but unmistakable grooming that always betrays people who know how to make an impression. He looked like an advertising image from a glossy magazine, not the cover, no, but a page with an expensive watch or car. His manner, confident but not defiant, strategically calculated rather than sincere, immediately attracted attention. Adelina, the sister, exclaimed, jumping up, "This is Gaspard, Gaspard, this is my sister Adelina." He stood up and held out his hand with that perfect smile that seemed to have been rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Adelina, how nice to finally meet you. Your sister talks about you all the time." "Nice to meet you, too," I replied, shaking his hand, firm, confident, honed to automaticity, like a handshake from a luxury real estate salesman. We sat down, and the conversation immediately took the form of a social exchange. My parents began to ask Gaspard about his life, his past, where he grew up, what his hobbies were, and how he met my sister. He answered without hesitation. Each of his answers was neatly worded, nothing superfluous, everything was in place, everything was appropriate, and it all sounded it's too smooth. It wasn't that he said anything suspicious, rather, everything was too perfect, too thoughtful, as if this was not a living person, but an ideal candidate who had prepared a speech for the interview in advance. We went into the dining room, and dinner continued. Gaspard admired his mother's culinary talents, asked his father thoughtful questions about his youth and career, and in general was so charming that it almost seemed that he was not a man, but the embodiment of parental dreams. Her sister was beaming, literally radiating light, as if every compliment from Gaspard reinforced her belief that she had made the right choice. During one of the pauses, I finally decided. "So, Gaspard," I asked with a slight smile, but with an attentive look, "what exactly do you do in finance? Investment banking, portfolio management?" He looked at me, still smiling, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes for a split second, barely perceptible, but still real. "I work with clients on various financial strategies," he began, still confidently, "portfolio optimization, risk management, and similar issues." "It's pretty vague. What company do you work for?" My voice sounded calmer than I expected, but behind this outward equanimity there was tension, accumulating in my chest with every heartbeat, like the weight of water behind a dam. "Adelina," my sister instantly flared up, her voice becoming shrill, as if I had just insulted a shrine. "You don't need to interrogate him, I'm just making conversation," I replied, without taking my eyes off Gaspard, who shifted slightly in his chair, as if he suddenly felt uncomfortable. "What's the name of your company, Gaspard?" I repeated, this time bluntly, clearly, as if hammering a nail. He looked away, looked out the window for a second, as if looking for inspiration, and finally said, "This is a small company, you probably don't know her, we specialize in private equity management." He said it quickly, almost with a hint of annoyance, and everything inside me tensed even more, not because he refused to give the name, but because of the way he did it, with what a clear reluctance to go into details, as if the very fact that he was being asked was for him a violation of an unwritten agreement. But I couldn't, and didn't want to, let it go. Something about his evasiveness was alarming. It was as if he had been trained to answer correctly, but only as long as the questions remained on the surface. I bowed my head and spoke softly but insistently, "It's just a company name, what is the main secret?" "There's no secret," Gaspard said, and his voice sounded restrained, but it no longer had the lightness that was present earlier. He visibly tensed, his gaze became prickly, but he still held himself, politely, carefully, like a man who has been taught how to manage an impression. "I just prefer to separate work and personal life." "It's weird," I said, no longer hiding the irony. "Most people don't mind telling me where they work, There was a pause, awkward and thick, as if the air in the room had become heavier. My parents fidgeted, the father cleared his throat, as if trying to defuse the situation. Maybe we should talk about something else? But I was on the rise, as if something inside me had crossed a line beyond which it was impossible to stop. How much money do you earn? Are you financially stable enough to support my sister? My question sounded harsh, perhaps even too much, but it was caused not only by logic, but also by anxiety, which I could not ignore. Adelina, my mother exclaimed, sharply, accusingly. I looked at her. These are reasonable questions. He wants to marry her in 2 months. We need to find out if he can actually take care of her. My father got up, came up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. His face was serious and tired at the same time. Adelina, I think it's time for you to go home. I stared at him, not believing he was saying that. I asked. And at that moment my mother's voice sounded like a sentence. You're creating a tense atmosphere. If you can't be polite to our guest, then maybe you should leave. I looked around the table at everyone. My parents were obviously upset with me. My sister looked humiliated, but there was also a triumphant gleam in her eyes. She had won this fight, and Gaspard was looking at me with an expression in which anger and victory could be discerned, carefully hidden under the politeness on duty. Okay, I said, getting up and grabbing my purse. I see that I am not welcome here. No one said anything as I headed for the door. No one tried to stop me, apologize, understand, or at least offer to sort it out. They were all more concerned about Gaspard's comfort than my legitimate concerns. I drove home with a heavy heart, with pain like a stone stuck in my chest. Maybe I was overdoing it. Maybe I should have chosen a softer path, but something about his evasiveness, those mirror-smooth answers, bothered me. People who have nothing to hide don't behave like that when they are asked simple questions about their work. A week passed, and I tried my best to put this disaster out of my mind, focus on work, and not think about the family drama that seemed to unfold according to a scenario where I no longer had the right to vote or have an opinion. But on Saturday afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, I wasn't inviting guests, and I wasn't even planning to leave the house, because all I wanted was silence, some peace, and a hot cup of coffee. I went to the door, opened it, and froze. My parents, my sister and Gaspard were standing on the threshold. Before I could say anything, they had already squeezed past me into the apartment, as if it were their territory. I asked, watching them enter my living room, looking around as if they were participating in some kind of strange inspection. Gaspard, without hiding his interest, examined every detail like a real estate expert at a luxury apartment show. His gaze swept over the walls, the shelves, the furniture, and the kitchen, where his sister immediately led him, proudly pointing to the granite countertops, built-in appliances, and neat drawers, as if she had spent months creating the space. The parents stood a little to the side, silently watching as their youngest daughter showed the new family member my house. Why are you all here? I asked again, and this time my voice faltered. Mom turned to me, and her face was someone else's, cold, determined, with a kind of new, frightening rigidity. This is my apartment, she said, as if she were reading an official document. I have the right to come here whenever I want. Her words sounded like a blow. Okay, I made an effort to remain calm, but why are you here with them? Mom turned to Gaspard, as if I wasn't standing next to her. So, what do you think? Is this place suitable for you? He nodded, with the same expression of satisfaction that I had already seen on his face at the dinner table. It's perfect. It would be a wonderful family nest, he said, and the sweetness of his words made me feel sick. My sister was beaming, just as she had that evening when she told me about the ring. Okay, Mom said, looking at me now. Your sister and Gaspard have decided to live together. They need a place where they can start a life together, and this apartment is perfect for them. I stared at them in disbelief. But I live here, I said, and my voice sounded faint, far away, as if it were coming from someone else. That's your problem, Mom snapped with a coldness that took my breath away. Your sister is getting married soon, she needs this place, and you're alone, you don't need a man. The cruelty of her words was amazing, not because I hadn't expected such a turn, but because of how peremptorily and coldly she said it, as if she were passing sentence without a shadow of doubt or a drop of compassion. Are you suggesting that I move out? I asked, hoping that there would be at least a glimmer of doubt, regret in her eyes, that it was just an evil impulsive reaction caused by emotions. but my mother nodded, briefly, restrainedly, like a person announcing a dry fact. "You have 2 weeks." After that, they all turned around as one team and left my apartment without looking back or saying goodbye, leaving me standing in the middle of a room in which, until recently, I felt safe, like in a fortress that I built with my own hands. I don't remember how long I stood in the living room after the door slammed, but it felt like hours had passed. I was just looking at the walls that I had painted myself, in warm shades of linen and sand, remembering every brush stroke, every drop that accidentally fell on the floor, which I restored with love and patience, remembering how long it took me to choose the shade of wood to match the kitchen, which I completely redesigned, starting from tiles and finishing with built-in appliances. My first impulse was to call my mother and yell at her, to throw everything I had accumulated that evening into the phone: pain, humiliation, betrayal, but I knew it was useless. It won't change anything. The second impulse was to just sit down and cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, something else rose from the depths of his soul: anger, not hysterical, but deep, pure, burning. It displaced the shock, displaced the pain, and became fuel. Great, if that's how they decided to play it, then that's how it's going to be. I wasn't going to beg, I wasn't going to prove myself right, I wasn't going to explain why my place here was as valid as their desire to get rid of me. I can handle it. I am an adult, perhaps the only adult in this whole story. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and immediately started searching for apartments on the internet. I had criteria, nothing extraordinary, just reasonable wishes: closer to work, in an area with good infrastructure, within the limits of the rent that I was already used to paying. I spent several hours carefully filtering offers, looking through photos, reading reviews, and by Sunday evening I had 3 viewings scheduled for next week. Monday, I took a long lunch break and went to the first viewing. The apartment was smaller than my current one, but neat, clean, with pleasant light and a green courtyard. The owner turned out to be a polite, correct person, and although I was not impressed with the apartment, it seemed like a good starting point. There was a second one on Tuesday. This apartment was located much closer to the office, which meant not only savings on the road and gasoline, but also the opportunity to sleep in. Extra hour in the morning. The kitchen was tiny, but I thought about how I could redesign the space to make it more functional. But the real winner was the third option. The apartment offered for viewing on Wednesday: spacious, modern, in a new house with 24-hour security, with a lobby more like a hotel lobby, and even a yoga room in the basement. The rent was a little higher than I paid my parents, but not so much as to be an obstacle. The host turned out to be punctual, businesslike, and clear in his wording. He immediately said that he required payment for the first and last months, as well as a deposit, and although this meant a significant blow to my savings, I knew I could handle it. "I'll take it," I said, almost without thinking, feeling the air in my chest become lighter. He nodded. "You can get the keys on Friday." I spent Thursday packing boxes, sorting things, deciding what to take with me and what to leave. I didn't touch a single thing that belonged to my parents or went with the apartment before I moved in. Almost all the furniture, household appliances, decorative elements, all this was mine, bought with my money over the past 4 years. If they really want Gaspard and my sister to build their lives here, let them start from scratch. It was Friday. I took the keys to my new apartment, put them in my jacket pocket and just stood with them in my hand for a few seconds, feeling the weight of the metal, the cold smooth surface, and with it an incredible feeling of freedom. It was not just a set of keys, it was a symbol of my personal space, my independence, my future, which I choose myself. The weekend was spent traveling. I rented a small truck, drove back and forth several times, carrying everything that was a part of my life: a sectional sofa, which I saved up for almost a year, a dining table and chairs that matched the color of the flooring, bedroom furniture, including a chest of drawers that I assembled myself, all kitchen appliances, including a coffee machine and a microwave, a TV and an entertainment system, even paintings that hung on the walls, reproductions that I bought one evening to add comfort. By Sunday evening, the old apartment was empty. There are only built-in cupboards, an old refrigerator, kitchen shelves. Everything that was here before me. She looked bleak and empty, alien and lifeless. I didn't feel any longing or regret, only lightness, almost oblivion. On Monday morning, I finally moved into my new apartment. It was smaller, but I could put my thoughts there like books on shelves, a space where no one will tell me it's time for me to leave, a space where my decisions are not questioned, a space where there is no room for manipulation, ultimatums, and engagement surprises, a space where I am the sole author of the script. At that moment, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Mom. I wondered for a second if I should answer the phone, but I still clicked on the green icon. What the hell did you do? Her voice hit my ear like a thunderclap. You took all the furniture. You took the household appliances. I exhaled, keeping the composure I'd managed to forge over the past few days. I took what belonged to me, I said calmly. I bought everything and paid for it myself. These things were for the apartment, she insisted. No, these things were mine. I'd been buying them with my own money for the last 4 years. If you wanted to give Gaspard and my sister a furnished apartment, you should have discussed it in advance. This is unacceptable. You need to return this furniture right now. My mother's voice on the phone rang with tension, as if she was already standing on the threshold, ready to rush in and personally take out of my apartment everything that, in her opinion, belonged to them by right. I laughed, briefly, bitterly, almost with relief, a laugh that was more tired than amused. I asked, not trying to be diplomatic, not caring how my words would be perceived, because at that moment it was completely clear to me, it's not just a whim, it's principles. You kicked me out of my apartment, gave me 2 weeks to leave without offering any help or compromise, and now you're angry that I took my things? You are selfish, malicious, and most importantly, you are unfair. I'm being practical. I need furniture in my new apartment, or maybe you wanted me to sleep on the floor and eat off the box. There was silence on the other end of the line, thick, ringing, the kind after which you expect someone to come to their senses, find the strength to admit at least partially wrong. But no, the mother's voice sounded again, but now it was colder than ever before, like steel that had been lowered into ice. You are no longer my daughter. And immediately the receiver was hung up. I just stared at the phone screen for a few seconds, as if he could answer why it all happened the way it did. Then she shrugged, slowly lowered him to the table and took a deep breath. If she really decided that she could just cut me out of her life with one sentence, well, I won't bother her. I had more important things to do than her theatrical lines. I devoted the next few weeks to not only settling into a new place, but also regaining the routine and stability I had lost in the storm of family disasters. I arranged the furniture with careful thoughtfulness, choosing the optimal location so that the space worked for me and not against me. I selected curtains, hung paintings, neatly organized the kitchen, all with the same inner feeling that I was finally creating something just for myself. I enjoyed the short drive to work, the silence in the mornings, and the cup of coffee I drank, not expecting any scandals or uninvited visits, and most importantly, there hasn't been a single call from the family in all this time, no attempts to drag me back into the cycle of drama, no requests to return the furniture, not a single reproach, and there was something akin to a blessing in that silence. 2 months have passed. One evening, flipping through social media with lazy indifference, I came across my sister's post. She posed in a familiar room, my former living room, but now it has been transformed beyond recognition. The walls have been repainted in light gray, the sofa is another, obviously budget, accessories from the market. She had documents in her hands and an expression of glee on her face. The caption under the photo read, "Officially the landlord." Today, Mom and Dad gave me an apartment. I am so grateful for the opportunity to start a new chapter of life in my home. I stared at the screen for a long time, as if trying to make sure that I had read it correctly. The apartment was given to her. They didn't just let me live, they didn't formalize a temporary agreement, they gave it to me officially, legally, as a gift. An apartment in which I invested not only money, but also my soul, project after project, detail after detail, year after year. Yes, it was a shame, very, but it's also liberating, because it was the final confirmation that I had made the right choice by leaving. These people have never seen me as an equal, they didn't appreciate it, they didn't respect me. I closed the app. I didn't like it or leave a comment. Some things don't require a reaction, they require awareness. 2 more months passed quietly. I lived as I wanted to. She made acquaintances with neighbors, arranged cozy evenings, allowed herself to be lazy and happy. It was a life free of obligations, in which I was never asked if I wanted to participate. And suddenly, one evening, the phone rang. I looked at the screen and saw my sister's name. My first thought was to decline the call. We haven't spoken since the day they, like invading soldiers, entered my life and threw me out of it, but a spark of curiosity stirred in the voice of inner doubt. Why is she calling now? Hello, I replied, cautiously, as if another attack might come from the other end. Adelina, her sister's voice was trembling, and even through the speaker it could be heard that she was barely restraining herself. She might even have been crying. I need to see you, can we meet? It was unexpected, not like her, I asked, not hiding my suspicion. I can't talk on the phone, please, can we meet? Where there used to be a cafe not far from your old job, remember? Where are the tables outside? There was more than just excitement in her voice, but genuine frustration that was unmistakable. I hesitated, a part of me still wanted to hit reject and forget this call, but something in her voice, in that uncertainty, in that desperation, cut me to the bone. Good, I asked, cautiously, leaving myself room to retreat. Now, I understand that this is unexpected, but it's important, very much. I looked at my watch. It was a little after 8 o'clock on Thursday evening. I wasn't going anywhere. I had no plans. Give me 30 minutes, I said, standing up, not giving myself time to change my mind. While I was packing, my head was full of questions. What could have happened? Why did she suddenly need to meet? Had she changed her mind? Perhaps Gaspard turned out to be completely different from who he pretended to be? Maybe he finally showed his real face, and she remembered how I tried to warn her. I found my sister sitting at a corner table in the very cafe that was once a place for carefree dinners and casual meetings, and when I saw her, I immediately realized that the confident, radiant woman who joyfully showed off the ring at the family dinner had disappeared without a trace. Only a frightened, haggard shadow remained. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair, usually carefully styled, was pulled back into an uneven bun, and her fingers were constantly fiddling with a napkin, as if she was looking for some kind of support in the senseless movement. The wedding ring still glittered on her ring finger, but now it looked almost mocking, like a symbol of an illusion that had crumbled to dust. Thank you for coming, she said softly when I sat down across from her, and there was no reproach or pride in her voice, just fatigue and something painfully broken. I asked, trying to speak softly, but an uneasy feeling was already building inside. You look terrible, she tried to grin, but it came out as a strangled sound, more like a sob. Gaspard has problems, financial, serious ones. Something tightened in my stomach. I felt a chill run down my spine, as if my body had figured out where this conversation was going. What's the problem? I asked, afraid to hear the answer. He's a gambler, she whispered. A gambler. He owed money, a lot. Very bad people. I didn't say anything, just looked at her, hoping that she would say joke, exaggeration, mistake, but she was looking at the table, and tears were rolling down her cheeks again. I asked, and my voice was almost a whisper. 300,000, she said, and that number hit me like a slap in the face. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I'd just heard. $300,000? I repeated, almost shouting out, not believing that this was really happening. She nodded, wiping her face. I didn't know anything. He was hiding it. And last week some people came to us, men, they were looking for him. They were scary, serious ones. They told me about the debts. No, I said abruptly, almost automatically. You can't stay with him, you have to leave, immediately. But she immediately nodded defensively. It's not his fault. He said it was a long time ago. He doesn't play anymore. It's just the consequences. He's just a loser. I couldn't believe my ears. Listen to yourself, I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. Despite the storm inside, you're justifying a man who lied to you, hid from you that he owed hundreds of thousands of dollars, and is now endangering not only himself, but you as well. This is not a failure, it's an addiction, and it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. She tried to say something else, but I interrupted. How are you going to help him at all? I asked. She hesitated, lowered her eyes. I thought you could lend us some money. I stared at her, sure I'd misheard her. I'm sorry? I asked again. Well, not a gift, to borrow, we would have returned everything. It's just if you could get a loan or something. I laughed, loudly, even a little hysterically. Do you really want me to take on a debt of $300,000 to save your drug-addicted gambler? I barely restrained myself from raising my voice. He's not a drug addict. He said he quit, she exclaimed. Of course he did. That's how addiction works. They always say they quit. She straightened up abruptly. You're just jealous. Because I found someone, and you're still alone. I leaned forward, looking her straight in the eye. I'm trying to save your life, you idiot. This man is trouble, trouble in a suit and with a smile. You just refuse to see it. I don't need salvation, I need a sister, she screamed, and her voice cracked. Well, then find someone else, I said, and stood up. I'm not going to ruin my life for your illusion. She grabbed my hand in desperation, clinging like a drowning woman. Please, Adelina. I do not know what to do. I looked at her, and my stomach clenched. Break up with him, move in with mom and dad, start over. I can't, she whispered, then it's up to you to deal with it yourself. I left the cafe, feeling nausea rising in my throat. My sister was in real trouble, but I couldn't help her if she wasn't ready to help herself. In the evening, my parents called. I noticed the call right away. The screen lit up with a familiar name, and for a few seconds I just stared at it without touching the phone, fighting the temptation to ignore it, turn off the sound, hide the handset under my pillow. But the inner certainty that they would continue to call until they got their way overcame. I sighed and accepted the challenge. Adelina, you have to help your sister. My father spoke without introduction, without greetings. Immediately, like a knife that cut all the distances, his voice was deliberately firm, like that of a man who does not believe in what he is saying, but speaks because that's the way it's supposed to be. I won't give her $300,000, I said calmly, without pathos. As an indisputable fact, she's a family member, and the family helps the family. He had already answered this almost reproachfully, and I felt a familiar feeling of anger rise in me, not a flash, but a heat. Confident and calm, like red, hot metal. The family doesn't kick family members out of the house either, but for some reason that didn't stop you. I reminded her with the same calm confidence. That's different, he replied irritably. As if he hoped that I would forget that memory doesn't work that way. She's in really big trouble. She has problems because she ignored all my warnings about Gaspard and decided to marry a stranger, as if it were a ticket to a new life, and not a roulette wheel with fake odds. These are the consequences of her choice. At that moment, Mom intervened in the conversation, her voice ringing with accusation, like a string stretched to the limit. You are cruel and selfish. I'm being smart, I replied, ironically emphasizing what our family has always lacked, and it seems that no one else is capable of that. I turned off the call and immediately turned off the phone, allowing silence to finally settle back into the apartment. A month later, I found out what had happened. I learned not from them, not from those who should have told, acknowledged, and apologized, but from my cousins and sisters, who, as it turned out, witnessed this new family drama. My sister, the one who posed so proudly with the documents for the apartment, sold it, the apartment that I renovated, in which I invested years, effort, money, my energy, and taste. She sold it and gave the money to Gaspard to pay off his debts. But Gaspard didn't just disappear with the money, as expected. As I tried to explain to them back then, he also quietly, for several weeks, withdrew money from her credit cards and bank accounts issued in her name, while she was unaware, passionate about saving her love. As a result, he stole another $50,000 from her. Then he disappeared completely. No farewell letter, no note, no phone call, just emptiness and endless bills. My sister was left with nothing, without an apartment, without a fiancé, without money, with debts that she did not make, but which have now become her burden. She had to return to her parents, the same ones who once kicked me out to make room for this sleek parasite. Now she lives with them, works 2 jobs and makes credit card payments every week, paying off debts made by someone else. When my mom called and told me all this, I honestly expected something else, if not remorse, then at least a confession that I was right, that I had asked questions for a reason, that I was worried. But no, instead of apologies, I heard screaming, accusations, and a real tantrum. It's your fault. Stop it, she screamed. If you had helped her back then, none of this would have happened. I couldn't believe my ears. If I had given her the money, I replied calmly, he would have taken it too, and he would have disappeared anyway. The only difference is that now I would have my own debts. You could have prevented it, she continued, as if it were some kind of moral game where the right move saves everyone. I tried to prevent it, I reminded her, and you all called me jealous, boring, and mean, just because I was asking reasonable questions. And now you want me to help pay off her credit card debts? She's your sister, sounded like a sentence. She made her choice, you've done everything, now live with the consequences, I said before hanging up the phone. I immediately blocked all my parents' phone numbers. When they started calling from other numbers, sending messages about family debt and how selfish I am, I changed my phone number. And it's been 6 months. I found out through friends that my sister still lives with her parents, still works 2 jobs, and still pays for mistakes made by the man she chose. Despite all the warnings, the police are still looking for him, but to no avail. He disappeared, as if he had never existed. I don't feel sorry for any of them. They had the opportunity to listen to me, to take care of me, but instead they declared me an enemy and kicked me out to make room for lies. They made their choice, I made mine, and now, for the first time in a long time, I'm completely happy with how everything turned out. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.